Okay, welcome. My name's Edwin Smith and I am the co-owner of a small online newspaper called the Weardale Gazette. We predominantly look at local stories, etc., and the news outlet itself was set up partly because there was a big decline in local news stories, but also that we always want to be impartial. We're not funded by anyone. We don't accept gifts. We don't do anything like that. So basically, our it allows us free to report as and when we want, and hopefully correctly and objectively, which we believe is missing in most of the mainstream press. We are based in Weardale, which is an area no one knows of in County Durham, but it's a beautiful place, and etc. And most of the stuff is done by my aunt, Anita Atkinson, because she's very local, involved in the local community. Myself, my thing is I'm more national and geopolitically active, and that's why I've decided to do some videos, hopefully to give people information, because I think what we lack right now in the, let's put it, in the mainstream outlets is actually information. I think we have a very biased, if not propagandized, news organisation. So I think hopefully I can inform and give people more information to make more objective and educated decisions and understanding about events geopolitically that will eventually, and if not already, inform, affect you on your every day-to-day life. So the place I want to start, obviously, currently is, if you're watching the media outlets, what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of NATO. You're going to see a lot of, very, what I call small, overblown stories, that lack massive credibility, to be fair, with regards to going to war. It's interesting that NATO, Keir Starmer, that's our current Prime Minister, has said that we will be at war with Russia by 2028. No one's asking why we'd want to be at war with Russia. Everyone's saying it's over Ukraine. So I think it's a good place to start there. If you work on the basis that everything happened in Ukraine 3 years ago, then, I think you really need to look at, objectivity. So what Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. Actually, it was just part of Russia. It was just a provincial state, to be fair, that was given its independence. And, it obviously borders Russia, so there is that. However, it's a massive country. It has loads of resources. It has, I think, 3 of the biggest nuclear reactors in Europe, so for energy production, etc. But that's not really the base point of it. It had free and fair elections up to 2014. And then in 2014, the government that was elected democratically by the people was overthrown by a group of people called the Bandari, who are right-wing nationalists. If you want to know a little bit more about them, the BBC did a documentary, I think in 2012, I think it was Panorama, about the Nazification of Ukraine and the rise of the Nazi influence in there. So we were actually reporting on this. The interesting thing is it was a coup that was over, and the overthrow was done. Once again, now you need to look into it, by the CIA and by MI6, which I'll come to all these people in more depth and what they do around the world and why we are not informed about them. So they were overthrown. Long story short, then there was an interim government, and then Zelensky came to power. You've got to remember about Ukraine right now. Ukraine is run under military law. There have been no elections in Ukraine since the start of the war. Now, you could argue that's because there's a war on. Well, you could argue also the fact that the people are asking for elections and you're not doing it, so it's not really a democracy anymore. But, that's for another conversation. So that brings you up to 2014 and up to the preceding war. Now, Ukraine is predominantly split into two halves. There is the Donbass area, which is a Russian-speaking and predominantly Russian-occupied, and that's all the way down to Crimea, and it has been like that since, Catherine the Great. So you're talking for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? They wanted to regain or retain that not independence, but ability to be Russian speaking, etc., etc. What you don't know about Zelensky's government and the Azov battalion and the ultra nationalists that are currently controlling the Ukraine, a small bunch of them, they banned the speaking of Russian in Ukraine. They banned anything to do with Russia in Ukraine. Now, the problem is with that is that goes against international law. Now, everything's going against international law at the moment, so we need to be really careful. But we supported this. They also were then killing Ukrainian-speaking civilians. Over 20,000 of them were murdered by the Ukrainian government between 2016 and 2020. Russia was intervening and started with what always Russia starts with, which is diplomacy. It started to speak to Ukraine, said, look, this needs to stop. That led to an Istanbul Agreement, which was to allow that part of Ukraine could be self-governing, a bit like Scotland and things, if they had an election and if they won it. Because that's what generally happens to solve an issue, rather than keep murdering people because you have got a nationalistic view. I've sort of skipped a little bit, so I need to go back. What I need to go back to, since 2014, Ukraine become highly militarized, right? And it become highly militarized by the support of NATO. America and NATO. It had NATO training, it had NATO armaments, it had NATO equipment, right? NATO commanders were helping them. And this was all done, actually, if you want to go and have another look at a bit more information, is this is, expanding it out, but there's a thing called the RAND Corporation, which are a USA think tank that is paid for by the Pentagon, that sits within American government, who were looking at how to destabilize Russia and how to destabilize China and how to keep the unipolar dominance of America and what they needed to do that. And one of the things that they said was they need to exhaust Russia and they need to build an army on its border and they need to to basically hopefully collapse it into regime change to break it up, so they, once again, like all colonial powers, which is what we do, is we are after their resources. Russia's got something in excess of $70 trillion worth of natural and rare earth resources, and we've got basically fuck all. That's the bottom line. So what we do is we go around the world robbing and stealing and murdering to get them, and we will use whatever methods that we can. And we've been doing that for hundreds of years. So let's not, and America's continued that. So let's not think that, that Great Britain was great. It was great for a few, and it was miserable for actually most of the general population of Britain and definitely the rest of the world. And America has been a continuation of that process, and we've been involved in it. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, would you like me to carry on? Korea. Yeah, I could just carry on with the list of wars that we keep doing just to get at other people's resources and destabilise and overthrow they are democratically elected governments. They might be not elected the way we want them, but that doesn't matter. Right, so back to Ukraine. So this brings us up to where we were. Right, Zelensky made an agreement, and part of the agreement was that they would allow free and fair elections in the Donbass, etc., etc. That would be, and he signed that. Russia agreed it and signed it, and then Boris Johnson flew into Kyiv and said, "Don't sign it. We will back you with whatever you need. You can basically do whatever you want." And the bottom line is we've been training you military, we've been supplying you with aid, and we've been paying you a lot of money. If you don't understand that, I don't know how much a comedian in Ukraine earns, but I'll tell you what I do know, House. He doesn't have a $60 million bank account in the Cayman Islands, which is seeable. You can find this through WikiLeaks. He doesn't have. You don't have £7 million houses in America. So the bottom line is Zelensky is basically a bought and paid for CIA asset, right? Along with probably a lot of other people, because this is how this system works. Do you know what I mean? We pay you whatever, you do our bidding. If your countrymen die, well, yeah, that's just one of them things, isn't it? As long as you're all right, don't worry about it. So the man running around in the military uniform is basically, taking money to get thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of his people murdered and killed in war. So that's where we are with that. So that brings us up to the backstory of this. Yeah, it's a backstory about destabilization. It's about a proxy war. When they say NATO needs to go to war with Russia, we're already at war with Russia. Everything that the Ukrainians do happens with NATO permission. NATO commanders are on the ground. They cannot fire a missile without NATO systems. They cannot guide missiles without NATO systems. It's all NATO. To actually believe that we're not at war, we are at war. And the question is why do they want to escalate? Well, they want to escalate because regardless of what you want to think, is there wasn't a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. What Putin said very clearly was, we'll make two basic objectives: the demilitarization, because it was the sixth or some biggest army in the world in Ukraine that was on Russia's border. And this is why they don't really advance. They basically just go to a point, they encircle and they kill Ukrainians till they exhaust them of weapons and men, which is getting very close to that situation right now. Right? And we will annex the Donbass and protect the Russian-speaking people, which is very similar to, when we said we will go to the Falklands Islands and protect the English-speaking people on the Falklands Islands. But there didn't seem to be a problem when we do it. There's just a problem when someone else does it, because this is about Russia's security. So there wasn't a full-scale invasion, they keep telling you, right? There's been a military operation, which actually has been priced. He's never gone further than the Donbass. They could have. They have not, right? So listen to what people do. Watch what people do rather than what they say. Now, the bottom line is we're losing the war. And Europe needs that 7 trillion of resources because it is bankrupt. We don't have any money. We don't have any future. We don't have any industry. We don't have nothing. So we need war. If we don't have war, and we don't go and rob like we have been doing as a colonial outlet, and this is most of Europe, Germany, France, Belgium, they're all the same, right? Then we will have to settle for what we are, which is generally quite insignificant, a very small player, and the oligarchy of our European things. So this is the likes of the Rothschilds and the bankers. Their power is all waning now anyhow, and if they don't create more, then what's going to happen is, we're basically just going to become this set of farmers that have very little to offer. Do you know what I mean? And we'll have to accept our place in a multipolar world where we don't have dominance and dictate and threaten and enslave people. And that is the reality of it. And it's starting with Russia, because you're going to start with the one that is nearest. The other thing is, obviously, this is also about American multipolarism. unipolarism, and what they're going to do is, they need to keep their world control, but that's waning because of China and India and the BRICS nations and stuff like that. So, but I'll come to them in further podcasts and things that maybe you would like to sort of look at, hopefully moving forward. So I think the key points of this is, you see things like Russia's running out of men. Now, Russia is mobilising its army because we have said we're going to attack them. It is a strategic move. They have the weaponry that is far superior to ours. That is proven. We have given Ukraine the best we've got. It no longer exists. They have hypersonic missiles. The only thing that they don't need to use is nuclear weapons. They don't need to use them. Hypersonics will do the same thing, but without killing the planet, right? So they don't need to use them. We are currently at the beck and call of America. We're buying basically their weapons that are shite at an overpriced, so Trump and the rest of the people can make money. Same in this country. We don't have the production capacity. We don't have anything. So the logical thing to do would be to sit there, listen to people's concerns, right, and act as a global participant, right, and subsequently, negotiate and use diplomacy. But we don't have diplomacy. We won't speak to them. We said we're not going to speak to them. This is Europe. We're not going to speak to the Russians. Well, okay, then the only option is militarily. The problem with militarily is we will be defeated. Without a shadow of a doubt, we'll be defeated. And thousands of our children will die for the oligarchy that sit in the city of London and in Brussels, right? And, a lot around the world, right? They will send us to die, your children to die, because they will not speak to Russia. It's that simple. Now, if you think Russia's expansionist, that's absolutely fine. Let me give you some things that actually mean it cannot be the case. The Soviet Union controlled most of Europe, including half of Germany. They agreed when it broke up, right, that they would give these countries independence. Right? We asked for that, and the reason we asked for it is because it's easy to manipulate them and get them to become proxies, which is what Ukraine is. Right? They agreed to that. On the agreement was this, that NATO would not expand 1 inch eastwards. NATO has expanded to Russia's border, and Russia has said enough. Now, if you want to give you some idea of the same gravity of that, when Russia wanted to put nuclear weapons in Cuba, because it was a sovereign state, right, America was prepared to nuke the world. So we have broken our agreements. NATO has broken its agreements. Yeah, Russia hasn't expanded. Actually, Russia was contracted, but NATO has expanded up to its borders and is trying to encircle it. I am not being pro-Russia, right? What I'm being pro-truth. I'm being pro-objectivity. I'm trying to say to you, look at what has happened. Yeah? Finland has been neutral. Switzerland has been neutral. They've never been attacked by Russia. So there's no issue here. Russia's not looking for attack. Russia's looking for trade. Russia's for a better life. Right? We are looking to attack because we need them resources to keep our oligarchy where they are, and this has been going on for centuries, and Russia has said enough, and we live in a different world. Ukraine is a proxy NATO war that it is losing, regardless of what you are telling you on your propaganda news, regardless of whatever. If Russia wanted to wipe out Ukraine, it could, make no bones about it. It would be done, right? And there's nothing we can do about it. Russia is not trying to do that. It's trying to send a message of demilitarization, that it will not have countries with nuclear weapons on its border. I completely agree. I wouldn't agree if Scotland took nuclear weapons from Russia and become part of that BRICS orientation and put them on our border. So let's have it right. This is a security agreement. It doesn't have to be this way. They want security. We want to rob them. That is the simple fact of this situation. We've actually said it. They said it from the outset. Regime change. Putin has to go. Who decides that? Why do we decide who needs to govern? It's not down to us. Yeah? Should never be down to us. We might not agree with how they govern. That's still nothing to fucking do with us, to be perfectly honest. Right? As long as they're not a threat to us. And Russia is not a threat to us, never has been a threat to us. Russia doesn't want war. Russia's never wanted war. Right? Russia suffered more than any other country in Europe because of war. And it will again. So let's have it right. Even John F. Kennedy said the Nazis would not have been defeated without the Russians. There you go. And what we're using right-wing, Nazi nationalism across Europe again to create a war with Russia. And the other thing about this is we have imposed sanctions on Russia, which you can do, but it's actually illegal under international law. We have stolen their money, which is illegal under international law. We have cost thousands in this country to, lose they're going to lose their homes or not heat their homes or feed their children because most of our energy comes from Russia because we've sold all of our energy to the globalists who now control our governments. And to all the people out there who, when they see that Ukraine has sent drones to blow up a refinery, what you've got to understand is this: oil is a fungible asset. Every Russian factory that blown up doesn't stop the war. What it does is it raises the oil price, which is good for a very few, but is not good for me or you. It also raises the oil price for Russia, so all that happens in that case is Russia sells less oil, so has bigger reserves, and gets more money. So that doesn't even work. You don't have to be a mathematician to work this out. You just have to sit and ask some very simple questions. Who is benefiting from this, and why would you want to do it? It's that simple, right? The bottom line is most American shale oil companies are benefiting, the Saudis are benefiting, everybody's benefiting, people who are suffering are the people in the West. So we could have Russia has made it very clear, demilitarization of Ukraine, and they can have a security agreement. Not a problem. What they cannot have is NATO troops on the ground on the Russian border. And personally, I don't see an issue with that. So there is no full-scale invasion. There is no Ukraine winning, right? And that was the truth about what has led to and will continue to be this war and one of the possible outcomes. So if you want your children to start dying in 2028, keep believing the media that what they are telling you. Don't question anything. Don't look at the facts I've been giving you and send your children to die. For the likes of Starmer, Merz, Macron and his oligarchy. Or start educating yourself, look outside of the media, see what you find. Thank you for listening. Any comments below, please leave them down there. Hopefully you've got more information to work with. And I will do further podcasts on further things both geopolitically and actually nationally. Okay? Thank you for listening, and like the Weardale Gazette.